I'll convey that back to Mr. Reinhardt following this meeting as well. And next item on the agenda is the Wisconsin Civic Association. They put a good deal of work into some recommendations, which are laid out in our packet. And so I see that we have Ms. Filipski. Is that correct?
Yes,
Thanks.
Lynn, please.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. So I'm going to just go through, unless you would like to make any presentation, we can just sort of start and work through your recommendations and have some discussion on each of them.
I think that's fine. There are really 4 key areas that the subcommittee looked at. Just so that you know the background, we got a lot of feedback from our members' Zoom meetings over the summer in July and August. But I appointed a subcommittee of which they had 10 members from various areas of Wisconsin that looked at problems in specific neighborhoods and then reported back to the board, which spoke about it, analyzed where we thought the key problems were. Also based on the fact, even though it was a COVID summer, we have always a lot of visitor traffic, people coming out who aren't really familiar with Wisconsin necessarily, who just want to break from town and want to walk around and bike out there. So we put this list together as the priorities of where we thought we could make areas safer. Luckily, we haven't had any accidents, but the sheer volume of people that come and the speed of which they arrive by car makes us want to really focus on these 4 distinct areas. So I will let you go back to run through the list. And if you have a question, I'm happy to comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's a lot of individual proposals, but I think that we should just take the time to go through the first one, each of them, so that the committee could make a recommendation, because you've laid them out, quite succinctly for us. Codfish Park at Gully Road, the proposal would be to extend the asphalt sidewalk all the way to Codfish Park Road. So does it stop like past the bridge?
It goes beyond the bridge, past a homeowner's driveway, then another house and driveway, and then the last house has no sidewalk. It's just dirt at this point.
Okay, so it's a fairly limited extension then.
Very short for the last homeowner.
Is there any discussion or, oh, thank you. There it is. I was trying to find that as well. Thanks, Erica. Is there any discussion on support or recommendation to extend this asphalt sidewalk? Or recommend for it to be extended? Yes, Mr. Rowland?
Yeah, I definitely think the sidewalk should be extended. I think it's a great improvement.
If I may, to you, Mr. McNeil, is this something that the DPW could add to a list, or what would be the best mechanism to advance this?
I would say it's a small stretch here. Depends on what else is needed, but to me, it's a small ask. We could get this taken care of really before summer if the committee is in favor.
Okay, so it sounds like unless anybody objects, we would consider that by unanimous consent, there is support for the first recommendation.
Yes.
And then moving on to the next one, at Codfish Park, just a little further down the intersection, onto Gully Road from Codfish Park Road. Their proposal is to add a pedestrian zebra crossing. So essentially, by zebra, do you mean just a standard crosswalk, or did you have something else in mind?
A standard crosswalk. I think you have to remember this is a very highly trafficked corner that's fairly blind. The children's playground is right around the corner, and then the main beach access to Sconset is dead ahead of you. So for people who have small children who are using the park quite a bit, this would provide an extra safety measure for drivers to pay attention, especially those drivers who are unfamiliar with the Codfish Park area in general. So we look at this as a way to provide a safer pedestrian crossing and to alert cars to pay attention.
And so that I'm clear, is the proposal to have, is your suggestion in this discussion, would the crosswalk go from where this extended sidewalk would be over to the dirt parking area? And essentially,
yes. Or it could go, I wish I had a photograph of that I'd shared with
my screen, if that's okay with everybody. So I've got it here. So I think the idea, if everybody could see that, would be whether the support would be
excellent
in here or like this. But I think this probably, since it would connect to a parking area to a sidewalk, would make more sense than that. That would just be my.
I agree.
So back to the work group for discussion, is there support to add a crosswalk in this area or discussion of concerns with that? I could see it may be hard to maintain with the amount of sand down there and the vehicle movements through there as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say from our standpoint, the crosswalk to the opening into the beach would make the most sense. That's the predominant pedestrian movement.
Like this, like on an angle.
See you in a while. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could we just leave the recommendation to the Public Works best discretion after they've placed the sidewalk to make the most appropriate crosswalk into that area?
I think that's a good suggestion. Does anybody else comments or concerns?
That's a good idea. That hedge needs to be cut back too, so you can see coming around that corner, because the kids going down there now and going over to that playground, that hedge is pretty high.
Okay. So if there's no further discussion, it sounds like there's unanimous consent to add a crosswalk in that area at the discretion of the Department of Public Works. The next is a stop sign. So the question would be, we would add a stop sign from cars turning onto Gully Road from Codfish Park Road. So your proposal would be essentially for folks taking a right-hand turn and heading up into the village?
Yes.
Committee, work group, any comments or thoughts on the stop sign there? I have to say, I don't know that it's warranted, but Mr. Pittman?
I think if we were to favorably support this stop sign, I think that kind of dictates where the crosswalk should go then, because the two would kind of go hand in hand, rather than create one with a stop sign and then one where you got to stop sometimes type situation.
Yes, one of my questions would be, I understand you want to sort of slow that traffic down, but I think there are standards as well for stop control at an intersection, and there's no oncoming traffic from the other direction.
There can be. Anyone who lives in Codfish Park is taking a left-hand turn there.
Yeah, but I would see the only other way I would see the justification, again, I'm not completely against it, just for discussion, would be
Right.
for interaction for vehicles backing out of that parking area. You know, that's where otherwise, I think there has to be justification for a stop sign. If we're going to put that in there, then that's part, let's see if I go to red. So the idea would be you do a stop line like this, a stop sign. Anybody else support or have concerns with putting a stop sign there?
Yes, I would say a stop sign would be inappropriate at that location. It's not, as you mentioned, it's not an intersection. That to that end, though, if there is the addition of a crosswalk, which we've already said, well, at least I've noted I'm supportive of, including doing some trimming of the hedges there, as Jack had mentioned, that would all go towards improving the safety of that particular corner. And obviously, if anyone's in the crosswalk, it's required to by state law to stop. So that's all I would have to say about that.
I concur. I would like to see the other two improvements as a first phase before going to a stop sign myself. We can always revisit this. You know, if in fact it's, you know, there's still this didn't help. Anybody else or a motion?
I'll move to put I'm not stop sign, leave it as is with the crosswalk, because the crosswalk is really gonna help stop traffic if there's anybody in the crosswalk.
Okay, so the motion would be a crosswalk, but no stop sign. I think if we're going to bundle all of these together, since we've kind of, now that I see, let me just make sure there's not one more. Oh.
Now, the other one is further up on Gully Road. So it's, the first three are very connected.
Yeah,
And I think, you know, if you give us the first two, and we can keep an eye on how that has improved the safety of that corner, we're happy to report that, you know, whichever way, if it really helps, that's great. If we think we need one more step, then we can ask you again. But I think the first two would be a huge jump.
Okay, so thank you. So we have a motion on the floor to support the extension of the asphalt sidewalk and the installation of a crosswalk, but to hold on a stop sign. Is that your motion, Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Murphy. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Chief Pittman?
Yes.
Chief Murphy?
Yes.
And Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
I admit that carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to Codfish Park at Gully Road. So now we're
I'm not on the Zoom call. I'm coming up, but not on yet.
So cars turning on to Gully Road. No, that was the last one. I'm sorry. Cars coming from Codfish Park do not have to stop before turning onto Ocean Ave, conflict with existing rotary traffic as well. And so I think we all know that spot at the top of the hill. Funky for sure. The way the roads kind of angle in there together. I was just looking, I think you gave us a photo of that
Yes.
spot. I mean, I think we all know it, but I'm just going through. Here we go. This is the best one. Let me share this. How do we handle this one? I guess is the, you know, your suggestion would be that the stop sign would go in here.
It's for the people coming up Gully Road. So yes, the road on the left where your arrow is right now would be a stop. Ocean Ave stops, Gully Road does not. And
Right.
then you're right into the rotary.
Well, it is an intersection. It's also I think, a big change. I mean, something like that, where does the sign go? And is it warranted, I guess, is the question. Discussion, comments? I guess
You got a stop sign there already for the cars coming from around the other way.
right.
So I don't know why you need a double stop. That line could be moved out a little more.
This one,
Right, yeah. Move that out a little more so that you can see, that way you can see any cars that are coming up.
if this was put out to here,
Right, yes.
thoughts or comments from anyone else? Yes, Mr. Sylvia's
Yeah,
hand.
on that, the stop bar is that far back because if you pull it up further, the telephone pole and the signs themselves become visibility issues. Looking down the hill, you actually can see better down the hill right where the stop bar is. I mean, I could go out and look at it again, but I'm pretty sure that the telephone pole, the light pole, and the signs kind of create an obstruction there if you move the stop sign out further. I mean, the bar.
Are we aware? Thank you for that. That's very valuable boots on the ground information. Are we aware of any accidents or, besides for just some congestion, perhaps concern or close call, either back to you, Lynn, or to anyone else on the work group, of this being something that would, really rise to the level of adding another sign in Wisconsin and a change?
I would say this picture looks very bucolic, but remember, as you see the fence line going down to the bridge, that's a parking area all the way down. And in the summer, that would have cars. If you don't do a stop sign, you might be able to get, as an alternative, a painted slow on the road, because people coming up Gully don't see very well what's on the left, and they're already focused on entering the rotary and the traffic around Claudette's, but they tend to go faster up the hill. But remember, it's not exactly a two-way road when you have the parking in play. So that does factor in slightly to what the logic was by the proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
Just from my opinion, this is either we treat it as an intersection or we treat it as a straight road, which I'm more inclined to do. Ocean comes up the Gully Road comes up and intersects the rotary as a straight road, whereas Ocean Ave coming in is treated as the intersection, almost as a quasi T or like a sloppy Y. I don't know if I'd be able to approve a stop sign here, to be honest with you, just to slow traffic for easing into the rotary.
Perhaps we could just look at maybe trimming the vegetation up a little bit to improve some sight distances in here.
That would help a lot.
So if we're going to be out working in this area and looking at the other hedge, maybe have a look at this, and maybe just increasing that visibility would help a little bit. This area, this little corner maybe hasn't been really looked at for a little bit, perhaps.
That would help a lot. You'd be able to see through that.
Mr. McNeil, any thoughts on that? Does that seem doable?
Yeah, we'll certainly take a look at it. I mean, I think most of the issues that we're hearing from, and when I've spoken with Lynn in the past, this is coming out of the seasonal uptick in population. We don't see any of these issues outside of the 3 months of summer. So we do come through brush cut, and we'll be knocking that area down again. We'll certainly pay attention to it, and we can take a look at it with Mr. Sylvia to tweak the location of that line if necessary. But these are all maintenance-related issues that are, just making sure everything is operational when people show up.
So I'm not hearing any support for adding the stop sign there. And it seems that, the DPW is aware of having to look at that, and maybe that will help. Anything further on that item? Okay, moving on to the next one. Now we're getting out of this area and we're headed over to New Street at Milestone Road. Concern is speeding, and the proposal is to add a strip of cobblestones to indicate you're entering a thickly settled area. So let me just get to that. I'm finding that picture. It might be just as easy for me to use the GIS in the aerial. And I'll
Mr. Chair, can we even do anything on that where it's still state highway there or not?
I think it would have to be, we'd have to make sure that the state highway layout is like here. You'd probably have to be working back in here. I think you'd have to go to MassDOT if you were going to do anything out in here. And Lynn, would your proposal be that, somewhere in here you have, I guess it would only really need to be on one side. So you would be doing something like this?
Yes. What's interesting is they put in a crosswalk, which you can see on that photograph for Main Street, but they didn't put in a crosswalk when they added the sidewalk across New Street to the bus stop. There's a bus stop right there. And part of our focus was slowing people down once they got across the crosswalk, because we didn't see how the state would allow us to do it before that. But we do have thickly settled signs on New Street about equal to that driveway up on the left that's kind of whitish. But people don't pay attention always to signs. So the idea of the cobble was to reinforce, like you do around the Boys and Girls Club, that kind of cobble that kind of wakes you up to you should be cautious. And we do have an issue of people speeding, especially on New Street and coming in on Main Street as well. So these two are actually related, a strip of cobblestones on either side, on both sides. But New Street could definitely use, if you're not going to do cobblestones, a crosswalk to get people to pay attention. There is no way to cross from your lovely sidewalk to the bus stop.
Thank you. Work group, any member comments? Concerns perhaps with maintenance of that type of a rumble strip and like what we've seen on Sparks Ave.
Yeah, just to mention, Mr. Chair, on the Sparks Ave existing conditions, that area is being reimagined, just for everyone's edification. It's likely that those routes, or the rumble strips, will be replaced with something more modern. And it's likely, as we already have removed the cobble or Belgian block rumble strip off of Sparks Avenue, it's likely we'll be seeing those, I'm sorry, did I say Sparks? Off of Surfside, when we repaved Surfside, it's likely they'll be removed off Sparks when that project comes through. And we'll be looking at something more along the lines of a raised crosswalk to serve the Boys and Girls Club in the future. But I'm not sure if that's appropriate here just to have this discussion. I just wanted to start with the maintenance of those existing ones.
Anyone else? I think this is one of the only ones we don't have pictures, but I think I hope the aerial. What about the consideration of improving the crosswalk connection over to the bus stop?
I think that would help a lot.
This maybe, helps somewhat. It seems to me that a pedestrian is somewhat in limbo here if they're going from the bike path to the bus stop, and that crosswalk should be extended.
So I know DPW is supporting and is actually the applicant for a new sign at the corner there that the Civic Association has proposed to direct people to Sconset, more of a directional sign than anything else, just to welcome people to Sconset. I think that may have an effect on directing people into the appropriate location. But with regard to funneling pedestrians and safety, obviously the state has just completed roadway safety improvements along the corridor that did include some work in the this end of the state highway. I would really defer any of these specific questions, particularly getting over to the bus station, to the transportation planner who works directly with the state on taking a look at these items. At the very least, the Plus department, who's dealing with that in the vacancy of the transportation planning effort.
I agree. I feel like we might be moving a little too on the fly, though I would just as one member have concern with adding the rumble strip again, without, I think, a little bit more of a master plan for, a little more focus on this intersection. Anyone else? Okay, so not hearing any other comment. It sounds like would the consensus be to refer this intersection to planning for additional study?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there
Again,
motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Gardner, how do you vote?
yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Chief Pittman,
Yes.
Chief Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Okay, so that's where we're at with that one. Going back to our list. Sorry, I've got to scroll back and forth here. Main Street at Milestone. I think it's the same issue. You're asking for cobblestones, but I think that Main Street that's still part of the state highway. And as Mr. McNeil said, they just did this big, a large project and didn't include that. I think it would have to go back to them if we were going to do anything there. But just so that we're clear, Lynn, where was it that you were considering?
It would be inside the triangle. So kind of across from where it's not where the water company open space is, but where it is vegetated. But it definitely sounds to me that cobblestones are not the option you want to pursue in the future. So I'm fine to table this.
Okay.
We are working on a revised area master plan, and Andrew Boris is on the group with us, and we can defer this for a longer term study, especially if Rob has said that you're looking at other ways to use pavement markers to slow people down or alert people to certain intersections. So I'm fine with tabling this so that you don't waste too much time
Thank you.
discussing. That probably means Sankaty Road at Ann's Lane, where we've also asked for cobblestones, is going to be a long-term idea of how to deal with people coming off the bike path onto Sconset, which is the intent of slowing cars down on Sankaty as they approach the village. So if you prefer, I'm happy to include that more in the area master plan.
I think that would be helpful in general. You know, pavement treatments for, you know, notification of
All right.
drivers. And,
Okay,
and then we could move up to, you were asking at Sankaty Road and Bayberry.
Bayberry.
So I've got that up here on the screen, and the consideration here would be a crosswalk, and the crosswalk you would propose to go from the bike path over onto Bayberry.
Yes, it's a bus stop, but it's also the main way of bikers exiting the Lighthouse and Baxter Road to get back on the bike path. Now, as we all know, the speed limit at this point on Sankaty Road, right below the golf course, is still 40 miles an hour. So it would be helpful for bikers to have some consideration to safely crossing the path. Now, there is a large utility pole. There is a dirt path people have made themselves because they want to get to the path, so they found an opening between vegetation, but it does happen to be next to a major power line. So you might shift that man-made path just a tad north by 2 feet. It won't show up well on this, but it would be very helpful for bicyclists who do the loop, but their main thing is going to, yeah, that's the dirt path, and you can see the guide wire that comes down from the utility pole is pretty extensive. But in order to get to the bus, or if you left your bike at the bus stop and you wanted to bike back to the village or wherever you were going, it would be very helpful to tie into the bike path.
So sort of here.
Yeah. You have room to play with it.
Thank you. Thoughts, discussion with a crosswalk at this location? Mr. Rowland?
Yeah, I'm in favor of the crosswalk. I think that's another good place to put one.
Anyone else?
I agree.
Does anybody have a dissenting opinion? Mr. Sylvia?
Yeah, so the path, you'd have to do it on an angle or move the path down further, even further past the NRTA post in order to be on where the north side of Bayberry cuts across, because right now it would literally be coming right into the middle of Bayberry. I'm not sure if we want to, you know, have a crosswalk literally dump right into the middle of an intersection instead of, you know, the side of the intersection, which would mean some brush cutting and probably a different path on the bike path in order to get over there, unless it's just for the bike bus stop, but I would guess it was for the bike path also.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add to that, you know, throwing a crosswalk in is not as simple as it may have been prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Anytime we consider something like this a pedestrian way, we need to include compliant access on both sides. So I'm a little concerned about being able to just throw crosswalks in. If the intent is to just slow 40-mile-an-hour people down and to to provide a safe place to cross your bike, it still needs to be in compliance with ADA standards, which means we need a landing ramp and on both sides. I think this needs to be, if it's something that the committee is in favor of, this is a bigger effort that's going to take coordination with the NRTA as well. I know they don't have anything other than a post here, but it's certainly something that needs to be coordinated if we're talking about landing in, on, or around what they're currently using for a stop here.
I agree. I support the concept, though I think it actually would need a plan so that we could make sure that it was compliant. And I don't want to see it just die by a recommendation to somewhere else, but I would like to see it more well developed. So in other words, I certainly support the concept and I understand the volume because of this. A lot of times I may not favor a crosswalk sort of in a middle of a road like this, but where that really is the feeder to the lighthouse and the volume, I think that we all are aware of bicyclists that are going, out to see the lighthouse from the bike path. I think that this would be a good little study area and to try to come up with, a compliant, safe crosswalk.
So
can I add something? It's also a major loop for walkers in the morning and the afternoon, and see the man with a dog on the right waiting to cross. It's not just bikers, and it is a heavily used loop. And that's why they created a dirt walkway, because otherwise they're walking on the road.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to refer this to the Transportation Planning Office. This is typical of what these dirt paths at these convenient crossings has typically been turned to in the past and ultimately turned into improvement projects that DPW would ultimately execute on.
Okay, so the motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded to refer this for refinement, study, and hopefully development of a plan through the Transportation Planning Office. Mr. Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Chief Pittman?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Chief Murphy?
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Thank you. I think this is a helpful discussion, and we'll hopefully move this forward. Scrolling back to my list. The triangle. Sankaty Road and Coffin, add a stop or a yield sign where the ramp off meets Coffin Street. So are you saying, let me just share this, that the stop or the yield would go
Further up on the right.
up in here?
Yeah.
Let me annotate it, like up in here.
Yes. Currently, there's a well-worn pavement sign that says "Do not enter," because I've seen people turn left and come through this part when they should have gone around the triangle. And then the people who are making the right onto Coffin Street, there's a hedge that is very severely close to the edge, which doesn't allow you to see anything. So then a driver who's going fast is all of a sudden meeting incoming traffic going eastbound on Coffin. It's probably the most dangerous intersection in the town. in the village. And, you know, going straight, you're going into the village, and hopefully by now you're going 25 miles an hour, if not slower. But if you watch the amount of landscape trucks and other trucks, commercial vehicles that whip around these corners, and drivers who are unfamiliar, or golfers leaving Sankaty on their way home, it's a very dangerous intersection. And for pedestrians, you really have to cross the road to be on the other side. Otherwise, you're going to be hit. So you've created a no parking zone on the north side of Coffin as you come around the corner to kind of help in that. But it needs a little bit more. It needs some attention here to make it safer, because I do find it just unbelievably dangerous.
Thank you. Work group discussion? Suggestions? I think we
Coming into, that is a problem with that hedge on the corner again. That's really a problem. They come down here, turn right, and they get to Coffin Street, want to turn right again, and that hedge is really a problem seeing around there.
But now it's the hedge you can't see that would be on the far right side on the curve. If we,
Right.
you know,
Mr.
if
Chair?
all hedges on corners could be curved instead of at right angles, we would have less of a problem anywhere. But
Yeah.
they've maintained it, and they've clipped it as hard as they can. But it's definitely dangerous.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say, you know, the Scottish Civic Association has supplied us with an extensive list of proposed or supposed encroachments throughout the village that the
There you are.
encroachment committee is investigating, including Mr. Beaugrand, myself, and my deputy, Stephen Arsenal. So I think this is very likely two locations where those have already been previously identified and are currently being investigated for notice. If Ms. Filipski could confirm that, I would say we could certainly say that that's already been on the list of things to be taken care of.
Yes, the encroachment, I've been thrilled with the support of the DPW and looking at areas that were identified for us by neighborhood. And in this case, I think by fixing that encroachment is helpful, but not a total solution. And so the speed of which people travel in the village here, they just treat that as a normal corner, and it's not.
So it sounds like at a minimum, we're going to look at, so is that confirmation that the properties at 2 Sankaty Road and 44 Shell Street have been identified to be looked at for encroachments?
Yes.
Okay. So that's in the works. Maybe we see if that helps and then revisit. I mean, I guess the proposal that's on the table that you've suggested in terms of a stop or a yield, I want to stay specific. You've already put a lot of time and thought into this. So I want to make sure that we've discussed and considered, you know, exactly what you were proposing, which I don't know that I was completely clear on. There's already a do not enter sign here, but you would want a stop or a yield to go where? I don't think I've quite understood how that would.
All right, so you're coming from the north down Sankaty Road. You've
Yeah.
now gotten into that little stretch.
Mhm.
And now I want you to stop before you get on Coffin Street.
So, oh, you would put a stop sign there. I see.
Right. Because this is a major thoroughfare for people who don't go through the middle of the historic district, which we don't want trucks and commercial traffic. So there are only two alternatives to go north: Coffin Street, which is the primary vehicle, or coming Burnell to Clifton. So most people will use Coffin Street. And so this is an area we just want some better visibility to turn, but also slow down and turn, because you can't, even if you made the corner better, you won't see the pedestrian walking on the Coffin Street. You won't see the bicyclists going on the street. It's very, very difficult. And it would be helpful to slow people down by stopping, taking a breath, and going, because they are racing down Sankaty Road and they do not change speed.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was gonna, maybe a long-term solution for this might be for that work group to suggest that that little stretch of Sankaty Road be removed and that corner become a green space.
So interesting.
Then that would take widening out, I think, Coffin Street in this area. So you're saying you'd come down and then make a right up onto Coffin Street. I think that would take a pretty major intersection reconstruction because of the way this angle, because this is an acute angle in here. I think you'd have to cut this back an awfully lot.
I don't know that you would very much, because if you've been out there and looked at it, I think it would take some reconstruction, but I think ultimately it would eliminate these high-speed turns and everything else. I don't think it's that big of a stretch there to reconfigure that other corner. And like I said, this is not to be done right now, but something maybe in the long-term plan. Get rid of these high-speed turns. That's part of the problem.
So
I think it's a good idea. You'd widen Coffin Street out a little so you can make that turn there. I don't know if that tree's in the way or not.
And it's consistent with what's been happening along Milestone as part of the state's safety improvements, teeing up these old intersections that kind of Y off like an off ramp.
if I might make a suggestion based on the discussion, it would be to advance the encroachment study through the Department of Public Works, and then to refer intersection improvement, perhaps including perhaps the elimination of the turnoff, also to the planning department. Essentially come up with a memo based on your memo for the items for these items. Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we can handle that by unanimous consent. Thank you. I'm just making notes here. Sorry, 1 second. And that's Sankaty, Coffin. And then Coffin at West Sankaty, very similar. So this is the next, as you proceed from the intersection we just discussed, heading out of the village. Let me share again. So coming here, your proposal would be, if I understand it, to add another stop bar to fully stop control this intersection here. Correct?
Yes, this would be like the intersection of Maury Lane and Ocean and Low Beach, where you have a three-way stop. And I think this would be a good addition. It's advocated by the neighborhood itself, not only for speed, but for safety of cyclists and walkers.
Is there any discussion or support for adding a stop sign at this location? Mr. Pittman?
I agree with that. I've always had a problem where these incomplete intersections where there's stop signs or stop control or traffic control are part of it, but not all of it. It's just a recipe for disaster. So this wouldn't be a big inconvenience for anybody, and it would improve safety.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to add a stop control at this intersection? One second, Erica?
I just wanted to make a note that, again, this is just going to be a recommendation. It has to go to the town manager and then get forwarded to the select board for public hearing, I believe. It has to be approved at that level.
Thank you. Is there a recommendation? Is there a motion to recommend to the town manager the installation of a stop sign at the intersection of
Coffin and West St.
Coffin and West Sankaty? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Also move.
And I'll second it.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Pittman?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Mr.
And
Chair.
with that, is there anything else, Lynn, that you would like to bring up or have us consider?
No, I really appreciate the time the working group has given to our recommendations. And I know the village loves the support from the town on the issues that are important to us, but that you may not see very often. I know I forwarded on a request for a traffic engineering study for speeding. That's something that will be probably discussed at another time or another level. But we obviously, our main problem is traffic control and speeding. And so looking at these roads and making them safer is a huge advantage to everyone. So thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Pittman.
In regards to that earlier part of her letter, there were several other immediate and seasonal steps that they requested be taken. And I would just like to at least comment on some of them. Obviously the speed trailer is something that we do deploy all over the island. We have one for many different areas. The other issue is solar radar signs. Those are prohibited by bylaw. Electronic signs are not allowed by town bylaw. Speed cameras are not allowed by Massachusetts state law.
Nancy Pittman.
And the rest of it we've already discussed. And other than that, additional signage, do they have a recommendation for where they would like additional signage? Maybe they could put a plan together with a map outlining where they think it would be beneficial, and we could review that at a future meeting.
I'm happy to do that. I think the main thing for us is exploring the 20 miles per hour special districts within the historic district of the village, which previously, Chief Pittman, you had been fairly positive about. And so without an engineering study looking at speeding, we can't progress with that. So this obviously is a main focal point within the area master plan, so it will be revisited, but it is a question of getting people to slow down. And this year we're going to make t-shirts for all the kids that say 20 is plenty, but that is hardly enough enforcement. And the Civic Association would be happy to explore buying another traffic trailer if you would see if that was something that would be helpful for the town that we could share. Just because having one for the entire island doesn't seem to make much of an impact, sadly. So we're just trying to work with you to come up with ideas. I realize some of them are not within the bylaws, but are something that are explored on that distant mainland. So if you come up with other ways, we would love to hear that. But, you know, our focus is on getting people to go slower and share the road. And so we do appreciate the decals that were painted on Main Street with bike pictures so that automobile drivers are getting the idea that when there isn't a bike path, you still have to be slower and slow down. And I know there is a movement for not having any speed signs around villages and get rid of signs, which we would all like to have less signs, but in certain cases, a reminder of what the speed zone is pretty critical. So thickly settled signs seem to make more difference than children at play, of which there are, I think, 4 signs on Maury Lane, with each house seems to have advocated for one, which do nothing on Maury Lane. So we do recognize adding a sign isn't necessarily helpful. I'm employing bike cops that can, I know they can't give tickets, but they can be very visible in traffic areas. So we need a little bit more of that. And we're happy to explore any ideas that you would share with us and that we might partially fund or fully fund ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so I will send off or work with Erica for a memo on the 3 intersections for the planning department, and I think the other items DPW has, and the other would be the be sure the town manager gets the recommendation on the stop sign. Thanks again. Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is review the request for school signage on South Shore Road at 2 South Pasture Lane, the Exploration Station, and speed humps. And we had a letter in our packet from Ms. Perry. I'm not sure if she is, I do see her in the participant list. If you'd like to join us.
Hi, Art, I'm here.
Okay, great. Would you like to start off and just go over your proposal?
Yeah, I was just trying to follow suit with what Chief Pittman said and recommended for the Lighthouse School when they came in with a similar request. And I think if we had school zone signs from the first part of South Shore Road to Blueberry, and I think Mr. Lowell had chimed in as well, I think it would go a long way. It seems to be this area where trucks and passenger cars start to gather speed and they just go barreling by. And something needs to be done before something more critical happens. So that's sort of my pitch.
Okay, thank you. And I'll share my screen here. We have in our packet the standards. I think we have 2 issues. You got the standards for school zones and whether this would in fact meet those standards. But I think for a second first, let's just have a look at the aerial and I'll have a clear understanding of what's being proposed. So the school zone would be in this vicinity here, as I understand it. And then the next issue is whether or not under state law and guidance, this in fact would qualify. And I'm wondering if Mr. Pittman or Mr. McNeil may be willing to comment on that.
Yeah.
Mr. Pittman.
This would not, this is a daycare center. It's not a school. there's only 3 schools that qualify in Nantucket for this, and that's the new school, Lighthouse, and the Nantucket Public Schools. Daycare centers don't qualify generally for school zone signage, crosswalks, etc. If they did, we'd have a lot of them all around the island, actually.
Thank you. I hope that's clear, Ms. Perry. I think that in terms of the school zone, it's just something we can't do, but we could have discussion on what we can do. And I would open that up for committee discussion in terms of any suggestions that anybody may have to help keep the speed in line with the speed limit or any other safety improvements in this area. I'm not hearing any. Ms. Perry, do you want to comment?
Sure. I guess my question is, what can we do about getting the speed from Surfside Road to Blueberry lowered then? I know it may not be a school as listed with those 3 that you mentioned, Mr. Pittman, but when they went to the zoning board and to the planning board, they did get, they had to go through the requirements as a school. So it's a gray area and I appreciate that, but the speed has just gotten out of control with the trucks. I know Mr. Gray has tried to help out, and I know there are more projects for the town where they will be going down to the sewer bed, and the haulers just don't seem to have any regard for the residents or the speed limit. So what can we do to slow them down?
Ms. Perry, I'm not sure if you could see my screen or not, or if you're just called in, but even if planning and zoning, gave consideration for the permitting as a school, there is a specific line within the guidance that, and I'll quote, the school must involve 1 or more grades between grade 1 and grade 8 inclusive, amongst other minimum warrants for the establishment of the school zone. So again, I think with respect to the school zone, it's essentially a non-starter due to the type of the operation. But back to your other comments and ideas, in terms of reducing the speed limit from South Shore Road to Bayberry, I believe that there would need to be, and I think it's been looked at, it would be related to the density of the development on a per square acre or linear foot basis in order to meet the requirements for what's known as thickly settled. And this doesn't meet those requirements based on the information that's been provided to us in the past. Perhaps with some of the other development that's proposed, maybe that would change. But my sense is that with this type of zoning, that might not be the case. I don't know if anyone else wants to expand on that. So the last meeting, and I know this isn't always but I think beyond, calls for enforcement or the police as they're able to, keeping an eye on it and understanding that this is a concern that's been raised. We're here for safety concerns. None of us want to see anything happen either, but I don't know what it is exactly that we really can do there. Anyone else?
Yeah. Art.
Yeah, Mr. Rowland.
Yeah, I said this at the last time this came up, and I know that it was sort of suggested that the traffic volume doesn't warrant it. But if there was a 3-way stop at Blueberry Lane and South Shore Road, that would totally slow down traffic in that whole area. I think it would accomplish what we're trying to do. slow the traffic down on South Shore Road. So I'll just throw that out there one more time. Thanks.
So the proposal would be a stop sign, essentially creating a three-way stop at Blueberry and South Shore. Thoughts are,
May I ask a question?
yes.
Can somebody explain, and I'm sorry for not knowing this, why South Shore Road would not be considered thickly settled when the Boulevard and Okorwa and Lover's Lane and Monahanset are, and they're posted as 25? I don't understand the difference in the areas.
I think that it's, I'd have to go back to the definition of thickly settled, and perhaps someone else here can remind me of that.
Well, I can partially explain it. It's two things, Erica. One is it goes back to when the board first voted on the thickly settled designation for Nantucket. They very clearly wanted certain roadways, feeder roadways, to remain at the higher speed limits. And they designated those, and what's his name had a map with all that, the traffic planner.
Oh, Mike Burns.
Yeah, Mike Burns, and those stayed that. The other thing is there's a lot of traffic on South Shore Road, but it comes from areas like Abrams Quarry, places like that don't front South Shore Road. So what makes a difference are the houses that deposit traffic into South Shore Road or abut it. And I think up that little stretch there might meet the definition, but what they do is they say it's within, I think it's a mile stretch you have to look at. So there might be a little piece that's thick, but you have to look at a running mile and see, and overall see what it does. And it doesn't meet it.
Okay, thank you.
And then, so thank you. There was a suggestion from Mr. Rowland with respect to the stop sign. Is there any support for that? Or just further discussion?
I don't support that idea.
I'm sorry, one more time.
I said, I do not support that idea.
Right. I fear that gives me, I don't want to call it flashback, but remembrance of Lover's Lane and Old South.
Right.
So with that being said, is there any further discussion, motions, or suggestions related to this request?
The stop signs aren't supposed to be used to slow traffic down, but we've had one on Orange Street in York for 25 or 30 years and it works.
Okay. Ms. Perry, thank you for your bringing this forward. And I don't know that there's too much more that we can do it at this time.
Okay, well, thank you. I had to try.
No, thank you very much for your interest and efforts. It's appreciated. We're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is I said this last time, I need to make a separate agenda. A review of a request for a curb cut at 3 Westchester Street, eliminating less than one on-street parking space. And Jeff Blackwell is here with us, who made this recommendation, and I will share my screen and turn it over to Jeff if you'd like to present your proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am before you today for an application to create a new off-street parking space just west of the intersection of Cliff Road at the beginning of Westchester Street. My plan shows, there's some photographs. you can see on the left-hand side of the photograph that there was a curb cut approved directly next door at number 7 Westchester Street in 2019. And we would be proposing to bring in a curb cut and create a driveway just to the right of the utility pole that's on the in the picture of the street sign there. The way that the existing parking stripes lay out, which I've shown on my plan, show that between the parking stripe that was installed for number 7 Westchester, that brand new curb cut, and the first of 3 9x20 parking spaces along the front of the property, number 3 Westchester, we would be taking up basically a 16-foot width or a length of roadway or curbing, which is less than the zoning length of, legal parking space. Currently, I'm sure you've all been up and down this street many, many times, and the parking practice of anyone parking along the north side of Westchester between Cliff Road and North Liberty is to park with the passenger side tires up on the sidewalk, which partially obstructs the sidewalk. This is the route that I use when I leave Children's Beach and I'm towing my whaler home on the weekends. And traversing this section of Westchester Street all the way to North Liberty is a continuous ducking in between where there is no parking or cars parked, and then letting people pass, and then weaving back and forth to make my way to the stop sign at North Liberty. In fact, the parking of the vehicles in the manner that they do it often results in people walking in the streets to circumnavigate the cars that are partially parked on the sidewalk. I don't think that, given the fact that we're not taking up a full length of a parkable space and the current practices, one would almost encourage less on-street parking, which I know is sort of opposite of the instinct here, but I just wanted to share my experiences, my thoughts about my use of this portion of the street. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'll start off. I did let Jeff know that the policy of the past policy of the work group in general has been to seek 2 off-site parking spaces, or a greater number, I should say, of off-site parking spaces created that result than what would be lost to the public for the creation of off-street parking. And so this doesn't accomplish that, but it does accomplish what Jeff just described in terms of it is 1 more vehicle off of the street and would open up a corridor here for that sort of duck in, if you will, or not quite turn off, to allow the other passage of traffic through here. And so I'll open that up to discussion from the rest of the work group. And it looks like, I believe we may have lost Mr. Pittman. Does anyone support or oppose the application before us or have concerns for discussion?
Mr. Chair, I do remember, I believe, a previous application that included subdivision of this property. The western section is being split off, I believe. I don't know if it's this property or not, but I do remember that there's been some just recent discussion and consideration about driveways as this or the adjacent property is subdivided and is already affected on-street parking. And I'm curious about access again from Wires Lane above to find out if something that is less substantially impactful to the community could be considered. I just, where it seems like the parking along Westchester with this and additional creative ways to create sellable properties is turning into downtown parking death by 1,000 cuts.
Thank you. Jeff, could you address any of the, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Murphy.
Just to, if this was creating a plus, then I might be for it, but I think just for the fact it's not creating a plus, it doesn't fall into our past practice, as well as I think whereas that is, I don't know, the benefit of just having a pull off is enough to sway that.
Thank you. Jeff, would you like to address, or could you address Mr. McNeil's comments with respect to the subdivision, or is that just the lot next door?
I'm not aware of a new subdivision next door. However, the property in question was subdivided earlier this year so that the existing frontage on Wires Way is maintained for the northerly lot, and then the southerly lot, main house, so-called, for 3 Westchester is on a separate lot. So that's, yes, there has been a subdivision of this property. I'm not sure that, this subdivision has created the need for an off-street parking space. The use of the maneuvering on Wires Way, which is extremely narrow, does not support the ability to maneuver a car into the small area on the east side of the smaller structure. It's extremely tight, and there's probably a 3 to 4 foot tall stone retaining wall along the north face of Wires Way. So navigation there is, unless you're driving a smart car or something, is basically nearly impossible, other than pulling in, dropping off groceries, and maybe backing down Wires Way into the Cliff Road travel lanes.
Thank you. I just changed the screen to, I found the 2014 aerial, just sort of shows some of the vehicles as they're parked along that stretch. The other aerials don't have them. I don't know if it's helpful or not. It doesn't show every vehicle, but further discussion, anyone else in support or choose to deny the application? Approve or deny? Suggestions? It doesn't sound like there's a favorable recommendation. Is there any opportunity, Jeff, for modification of the site to accommodate a second, perhaps 7x17 spot with some revisions to, retaining walls and landscaping, or any way to make that work in there?
I I'd be happy to, speak with the owner, and if this matter could be held open until the next meeting, I can have information submitted prior to the meeting to address that question.
Okay, I'm not hearing a positive recommendation, so it sounds like we'll table this matter to the next meeting unless anyone has anything further to add or direction to provide. Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks very much.
Sure, it's on the agenda. Bye. Next item on the agenda is the review of the Washington Ave encroachments. And I see we have Mr. Beaugrand here. I was in front of the select board 2 or 3 weeks ago to represent the past recommendations of the work group. And on this one item, where the work group had recommended no parking on either side of Washington Ave from D Street to Matticat Road, I'm working from memory. There was at least one Matticat resident that raised concern with the need for that parking, and the select board members essentially asked that the work group revisit the area to see what we might be able to come up with to both improve pedestrian safety in the area and maintain some on-street parking. Mr. Beaugrand has identified, and I think the DPW as well, the property corners have been staked out there, and there's been identification of encroachments along that corridor, and those owners are going to be notified or have been notified to clean up the encroachments. And I'll turn that over, I guess, if I could, to you, Mr. Beaugrand. Could you give us an update on that and when we might be able to have something that we could, work towards a further recommendation to the select board?
Thank you, Art. What I remember from the select board meeting was the fact that you wanted to see the actual formal survey of the area and the identification of the names of the owners. I must confess that I haven't gotten to that yet, although I do have the work that we did from the town's point of view is that in the T drive, in the DPW section, in the first one area, we have pictures of all of the lots that are involved from Washington, the corner of Washington, Matticat out, all the way down past D Street. What I must say that I was really very, very disappointed at is the fact that at the recommendation that I had made to you on behalf of the residents was at the result of two of the people that were at the town meeting, and one of the people who had provided us the framework in terms of what they wanted to do, then raised the objection at the meeting, principally because, in fact, he wanted to not move forward until there was a decision with respect to putting sidewalks in on that section of the area. And Rob and I have both let them know that town is not looking forward to, that's not part of the planning at this point in time to put sidewalks in that area. So it's very frustrating. I mean, the thing is that I will, once we can get the actual survey, I will get the detail to you of the actual individual owners so that we can give the notice. But there is a real need with respect to addressing the issue of parking along here, because it is an issue that's been raised by all of the neighbors, particularly the summertime, with respect to people going to Millie's parking there. And without the line and without the signage, it is impossible for the police to be able to enforce the no parking, because there are no parking signs in certain of the area. So all I can say is that I'm really very frustrated, because what I did and what you guys did was to address the concerns of the group that represented the area residents. And then we were surprised that when we were in front of town meeting with one of the residents taking a position that was opposite to what they had asked us to bring forward and what you had recommended moving forward with. So, so that's my status report as of this point in time.
Mr. Murphy?
All right, I just want to say you did a good job in front of the select board with that. I think that was a difficult position to be put in. And I think, in my personal opinion, is that the parking trumped the safety of the people walking. And in short of putting in a pedestrian way on this, I think the idea of making that no parking is the only way to make safe travel for cars and people on that road. That's still my opinion. I just think the compromise has to be decided whether parking is important or whether the pedestrian safety is important on that road. And I would lean on the pedestrian safety of the people that walk that road.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. What I heard back was that, as you said, can we strike a balance? And, to me, the balance may be parking on one side and the pedestrian path on the other. And of course, one of the things we discussed at the last meeting is that if we say remove all the encroachments and open up that path on the south side of the road to be, where you've got a greater shoulder, to allow, if parking was to be allowed on the north side, and you would then preserve off, a walking path that could go the whole way off street and not a sidewalk. And at least in my opinion, in other words, it's just a grassed area that's free of obstructions, then perhaps that would work. The alternative being, of course, put the parking on that side and people would park off the road and on the shoulder, which would of course cause damage to both the shoulder and the edge of the road, unless there was, a greater project involved there. So my thinking is in response to the selectmen, again, my first support was that you just, along with Mr. Murphy just said, but if we've been given direction from them and it's not supported, then what else can we do that they may vote for? And I think if you were to allow the parking on the north side and make a clear walking path on the south side, that might do it. Mr. Murphy?
I think if you put parking on that north side, you have to make sure that every line is marked out within 10 feet of every driveway and roadway. And because we're not going to have access swinging a truck down a lot of those roads. They're already tight, and it's going to be tough to take and turn down to some of these addresses that are down more on the water. And that's going to severely limit the amount of parking you have. Just my opinion on that. And I think if you're, the idea of a grass path, I don't think anybody's going to walk on the dirt or the grass on people's lawns. I think they're just going to revert back to the roadway and walk in the middle of the road.
Anyone else? I mean, I guess part of the question is, will having a survey of this corridor and understanding that help us? And will that change anything?
I don't think so. Because I think that you can physically go down, and although some of the owners have already taken the stakes out of the ground, but it is pretty clear that there's about a 20-foot wide swath on the south side of the road that there's only one major area where I have where I have an encroachment, and on the other side there's not very many issues, because in fact the edge of the road, the houses on the left side of the road are almost on the edge of where the edge of the street is. So, I mean, I think the fact is that in that section, in the section from Matticat Road to D Street, it really is important to be able to because, and the reason you want to do that is because the buses and stuff come in D Street and then go down towards the point towards the ocean by Millie's, and so that's the area where you need to have it wide enough so that you're able to have pedestrians go and not be concerned about being hit by cars or trucks.
Anyone else? Want to weigh in on this? I guess our other option is to report back that we discussed and looked at it again and feel, that that remains our recommendation. Ultimately, it's all we are as an advisory board. In terms of when I say it remains our recommendation that, there be no parking on either side.
Right.
Mr. Murphy.
And I think just to include that in, and I think that needs to be the way until such time as a true pedestrian path can be created, and then it can be revisited and parking could be allowed.
If that was going to be the case, then I guess that would be back to a transportation planning type of a initiative.
Funding.
Though, Mr. Beaugrand, you referenced that the DPW has discussed this, and there is currently there's no plans right now for that. I know I've never seen.
I'll let Rob comment, but there's no plans with respect to putting in a walking path or a sidewalk.
Rob, you want to add anything here?
No, I think everything's been said. There are no plans. DPW is happy to put down signs and striping if recommended. Beyond that, people are expected to, when noticed, remove the encroachments as we have on any number of encroachments around the island.
Do we want to table this? I don't think that we have to decide on this today because of, the idea was that we would be back to them before the season, but I don't want to be something that we just keep taking a bunch of time month after month if there's nothing really coming of it. Is it something that we want to refer to planning? Understanding again, I do fear that has in the past not seemed to gone anywhere. Or what's the pleasure of the work group?
Those buses out there, when they go down Washington Ave, they need to be on the right-hand side of the road when they go down, because they're going to make that left-hand turn at the end there to get onto Matticat Road so they can park. So really, you can't allow any parking on that right-hand side of the road at all of Washington Ave, because those buses have to be on that side to make that turn.
I think there's already a stretch there that's designated, that's a yellow stripe, if I'm recalling right, in this
area. Right, they need to be able to make that turn there to make the left onto Matticat Road there.
Mr. Murphy?
If our only alternative right now is really to refer to planning and a traffic use or a traffic planner, then I'd make that motion at least to try to move this along.
All right. Is there a second to refer this to planning for
second
for study? Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Pittman?
Yes.
Thank you. That was our last regular agenda item. Is there any other business that any members that wasn't anticipated 48 hours of the meeting that anybody would like to raise? Or for future agenda items? Oh, I'm sorry, we had one more, yes. We had the matter of Joy Street, and let me just put that up on my screen real quick. So there was we received an email concerning the yellow lines, and this is, as I recall it, the new yellow lines. Is that correct, Erica?
Mr. Chair, if we
Go
could
ahead.
pick up Ray for a second there. Ray just recently installed the recommended signage and striping, and he could probably comment on the concern a little bit more succinctly.
Yes, please, Ray.
Yeah, so these were installed last week. I had to do all the driveways on that left side. I knew, as soon as I saw this, I knew this might come up, but not being a driveway, I didn't feel I should put it down without at least either it getting approved or, it was a tough one. It was one of those oddball situations that we run into sometimes, especially in the core usually, but where the steps are really close to the road. So if somebody parks there, you're blocking literally the entrance to the house. And I really wanted to paint it, but I didn't. I'm only doing, I did the whole stripe down the right side, and then on the left side, I did all the driveways. I was a little iffy on whether I should do that one, so I left it off. I erred on the side of caution because it's easier to put down the paint than to take it off. So if it's something that the board or we can just do without having it get approved, I can throw it right on my list. If not, then I just wanted to make sure that it didn't come back and bite me when I did it.
The thing is with that, if you paint your yellow line right in front of their steps, where they usually park anyway to get into their house, that means that they can't park there if there's a yellow line there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do or not. I don't know where they park.
Mr.
I
Murphy?
went by today and looked at that, and it would be my opinion that a yellow line is needed in front of their steps. If they were to exit the building in an emergency and somebody parked right there on the edge of the roadway, they'd have a limited ability to get out of their house. To get off
Yes,
their
I agree.
I concur. Is there a motion to install a yellow line in front of the steps?
So
That would
moved.
be my motion.
Second,
Made and seconded. Mr. Gardner,
yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Pittman,
Yes.
and Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Did anybody else have any other items to raise? I had one which was brought to my attention, and this may have to be, maybe it's just a quick answer, or maybe it is for future. But I was asked about the parking on Candle Street next to Main Street at 0 Main. And it's been gone back and forth, I believe, over the years between cab parking, as it typically is in the summer. And then I think maybe it reverted seasonally to either to 1 hour parking perhaps. But right now, this stretch is, as I understand it, still taxi parking only. And I just didn't know if that's, or I was asked, and there's been no vehicles there this time of year between the Uber and taxi,
They open that up this time of year.
yeah, does that just need to get changed? Is it just something that felt, was part of the past practice, or something we need to discuss, and how would we go about that? Either Mr. Pittman or Mr. McNeil, do you have any knowledge of, or?
Sure. I would simply say, as far as the future goes, there's that section of Candle itself, from near the bus station up to Main Street is certainly part of the downtown sidewalk improvement program and is being considered for reconstruction. You have a Salem Street. Is that Salem? Yeah, Salem Street
right
that comes out, no stop sign, so they have the right of way, and they make that turn. And when we did the sidewalk along Lower Main and relocated the taxi stand, I think the thought was at some point we would be widening the sidewalk along Candle, independent of whatever happens over at Stop and Shop with the Harborview project. So I would say we would certainly look to narrow the roadway, the Belgian block roadway section of Candle to what's needed for truck movements and house moves and all, and that like to the minimum width needed, and give the remainder of that width to the pedestrians. So that's the direction that this department would be going with, and with the recommendations of the Transportation Planning Office. But it remains to be seen and remains to be executed, as we're right now down the other end, going to be working on Easy Street and Lower Broad before we come back down here.
If I could
Please.
answer the question, that the select board's policy regarding Candle Street at this point is that effective Monday after Stroll weekend to Thursday before Daffodil weekend, Candle Street from Main Street to Salem Street is supposed to be turned into 2-hour zones. And then there's I believe I don't know if there still is, a loading zone on Candle Street between Salem and Main Street. That's supposed to be converted into 2-hour parking as well.
And Bill, is that the same for Broad Street as well, from the JC all the way down to the?
No.
I don't think so. I think that those changes were all made after they last adopted this policy in 2017.
Thank you, Chief Pittman. That's extremely helpful, and I think it answers the question. And I can report back that we're only essentially 2 weeks away from that change happening. I don't think anything else has to occur there unless someone has anything further. That answers it. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything further? Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns with the minutes? Hearing none, those are adopted by unanimous consent.
Art, can you please do a roll call motion on that?
On the minutes?
Every vote has to be by roll call.
So my understanding on minutes is that they're allowed to be adopted without a vote.
My understanding from working in the select board office is that every motion requires a roll call vote when you're remote.
But there is no motion.
You need to make one. Somebody needs to move to approve the minutes.
Also move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Rowlands,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Pittman,
Aye.
Mr. McNeil.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. And I'll do a follow-up on that. I think that we could just check on that. I think it's just efficient. And that came from one of the training seminars. Perhaps I'm mistaken on that from town council. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Rowland,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Pittman,
Aye.
McNeil.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I'll get back in touch with you about the stuff from Sconset and came up with the meeting. Thank you.